We're just chatting about this process of giving a handful of people who've expressed interest in the program an opportunity before we start our full-on recruiting in October, usually around the third week. We want to give you folks an opportunity to hear from people who just went through the program, because I've chatted with both of you and a couple of the other folks. And I want to make sure you hear what the experience was like, because this year was an absolutely unique year in that I don't think Elliot, I don't think Jonna originally expected the program to play out the way it did because of COVID. Originally, everybody was supposed to be in the classroom in Kingston together. And because of COVID, what happened was, as I think both you know, because you sort of went through partial class, is we went fully remote. And so Jonna and Elliot were two of the students who went through that experience from beginning to end. And so what we want to do is just chat with them about that experience, because the way things are playing out right now, it's reasonable to assume that this program next year will be a variant on this remote delivery piece. And I'll touch on the direction we're heading now. Obviously, what's going on with COVID and how that plays out is going to have a bearing, but we're getting locked in now pretty closely to what we think would be the right approach. And so we wanted to get a very small group together. This is informal. This is not us doing a presentation or anything like that. It's just an opportunity to have a conversation with these two folks. So in terms of process, what I'd like to do is just ask Jonna and Elliot questions about their experience, and that you two folks can sit back and just absorb it, or you can jump in at any point in time and ask for more information that you think could be helpful to you. Okay. Does that sound like a reasonable way? Probably won't take us more than 20 minutes or so. Okay. And the other angle on this too is that we have a very robust scholarship fund this year. And the reality is, for folks who've been involved already, we will be using the funds that we have existing now. So there's a good opportunity now, if it's of interest to you, to think about this in terms of getting your application in. But there's no pressure for it. It's just we're going to start releasing the funds because we were able to actually get additional money from some donors this year, because the program is now moving into its 8th year. And so its sustainability is now without question. And so that's when donors are willing to step to the plate. Okay, so I'm going to jump into it. I haven't briefed John and Elliot. I want you guys to just say the truth. And I mean that. Don't sugarcoat anything. What was it like? So I'm just going to ask some questions. So I'll start with you, Elliot, and then I'll jump to John. Elliot, just for the group, maybe just a real quick background. I mean, I could give the background, but better if it comes from you. You know, school at Guelph, engineering. Tell the little quick story, and then why did you even consider the GDB? That's the first part. I'll ask you a follow-up, and then John, I'm going to come to you. Sound good? Okay, Elliot.
Yeah, so let me just make sure I'm off mute. Okay, perfect. So a little bit about me. I did an undergrad in engineering at the School of Guelph. So I really thought I was a very science and analytical kind of person. And I found that I enjoyed that, but when I entered the workforce, I worked in production for 1 year. And I was kind of like a project manager, kind of production engineer. And I worked at a small business, so I got to see like lots of different avenues of the company. So I got to work with finance and sales and the other legs of the company. And that's kind of the main reason I wanted to join the GDB, was to diversify my skill set. So instead of just being on the engineering side, I could use the GDB to kind of get a bigger outlook on the company and hopefully move into other segments. So I'd say that's the main reason I chose to enter the GDB.
Perfect. Thanks, Elliot. John, a similar gig. What's the background and why?
Sure. So I went to Western and I did a undergrad in philosophy. And after that, the summer before, I worked for the government in just communications, and I really enjoyed it. And during the end of my 4th year, I really knew I wanted to go into business. So looking at the GDB program, it was just a way that I could really like take my passion for art and really have a foundations in business. And I always heard great things about Smith. My brother went to Queens. It's like a great business school. And I also knew that I wanted to do my MBA in the future, or I potentially wanted to do it. So I liked that these courses actually could build onto something different. And I didn't really see that in any other program, that you could actually apply the courses to somewhere else. And yeah, and it was just a great opportunity to learn to moving forward for any job that I wanted.
Okay. So back to you, Jonna. So when we think about this program, originally it would have been 10 courses, all living together in Kingston, all locked into Goods Hall, as we would control almost the whole business school for the summer. And boom, it changes. And so we still did 10 courses. We still did the whole teams model. We still had the whole careers model, and we did a bunch of other things. But what did you find most helpful about the experience, given that it was all delivered remotely?
I think the most helpful thing for me is that I got to stay in my home and be with my support system and my family. So it was a great way for when I was stressed. I was already where I was comfortable in a sense. Obviously change is hard, and the remote, there was obviously challenges to it at first, but you got really used to it, and you were still able to really make connections, which I really liked.
Beautiful. Okay, Elliot, over to you with just a little bit of a spin on it. How was the delivery remote compared to what you anticipated a residential session would be like? How would you compare those two things?
To compare them, I'd say the fact that the lectures could be recorded was a huge advantage, because you could easily go back if you missed something or you weren't feeling that well that day. You could just rewatch the entire lecture and kind of get the gist. Or for studying for exams, is a great way to study, just by having all the material available.
And how did you find the academic delivery and experience? Because let's be clear, and you guys know this is a premium program. You're going to pay a lot of money for this program. You guys know that. I mean, obviously, if you do the MBA, you get the GDB in a way for free, quasi, but regardless, it's a big investment. Elliot, what was your experience like with remote delivery? And then John, over to you. How did it go for you?
So I'd say for that, like the studio they have set up at Smith was a huge advantage. Like I was a bit worried at first that it would just be kind of like a professor in his living room trying to figure out the tech and just kind of having glitches along the way. But I think the setup they have at Smith with the studio and kind of the sound and lighting and tech guy really made it smooth.
Beautiful. Okay, John, over to you.
I was definitely nervous at first because, like you did say, it is an investment, and I wanted to make sure that this premium program was still offered the same quality. So there's obviously, I was afraid at first, but I found that the delivery was kind of what was promised. It was a great delivery. Like they have already set it up before for previous MBA programs. So there's still all the same elements that I'd want in a classroom. Jim was definitely able to still pick on me and call me out in class. So there's a lot of interaction, which is great, because for me, connection is something that's really important. And I wanted to make sure that I could have relationships with my classmates and my profs. And it was a really great atmosphere where I could unmute myself in class if that's what the professor wanted, or there was a system where I put my hand up and they always made sure to ask you. So it was delivered pretty great, which I was happy about.
And so, John, to you, when you think about one of the big things this program, one of its key goals is to help people understand the importance of teams and how to operate in teams. Can you comment on what that experience was truly like?
For sure. Yeah, like that was my first experience working in high performing teams where there was that much emphasis on growing and performing well within a team. So there were some times where it was like, wow, we're really focusing on this. I've never really done this, like in situations where you're giving feedback to a teammate, or you're developing your different skills. But it was really great. And like I find now in my job, I think about applying those same skills I think I'm way better at giving feedback just because that's something that we practiced. And it was really great to have like a team coach along the way, and they really help craft you into like high performing team.
Elliot?
Yeah, I'd say something very similar. Sorry, I just got an email. That I definitely learned how to be like a better teammate, just because on my team we had 6 others, so 7 total. And when the courses come at you very fast in the GDB, like you really need that solid team foundation. So I think it really taught me like resiliency and kind of how to attack like problems as a team and maximizing everyone's strengths to do it.
Elliot, to you, can you talk about, I mean, right now, things like diversity, inclusion are very important management topics. They're very important topics for society and obviously each of us. But this program talks about diversity in a big way. But can you explain how you see diversity in this program?
Yeah, so I think in terms of diversity, like we had a kind of teammates from all over, like even internationally, I think in some teams. And even geographically, like all across the country, we had people in Vancouver. I think we had some in PEI, if I remember.
Yep.
And in the leadership course, they also touch on like very important topics. Like we touched on like ethics and like the Black Lives Matter movement. So I definitely think there's a reflection on diversity throughout the program.
Beautiful. Jonna, any other views on that from your perspective?
I think that kind of wraps everything I was going to say. Yeah, you said it nicely.
And when you think about a typical team, Jonna, talk about your team in terms of the schools and the disciplines people came from.
Yeah, so everyone was very diverse in their skills and kind of who we were, which was what I think made us such a great team. I think we were put together in a perfect way. So we had people who were from philosophy, another history, life sciences, engineering. So we were all very different in what we brought to the table, which was really important when it came to different projects. We knew who was able to support people and what different skills. So we were able to work really well in a group doing that, versus if we were all the same, we would not be functioning as a high performing team.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, 2 more final questions. The one is, obviously with COVID, the assumptions people make is that it's very difficult to find opportunity. And I think that's a fair statement. But Jonna, can you comment maybe on the role of people like Andrew, the individual coach, and also the Career Advancement Center, and how were they an asset or not to you?
Yeah. I think they were great assets along the way. So you have your career counselors who help you through the summer. I met with mine all the time. I had a great relationship with both Sabrina and Kelly, who were my counselors, and they helped you from the very beginning to the end. And they helped you with your cover letter, your resume. If you had fears about something, or they were always just excited for you in the next step, which I liked. Like they helped me with interview prep. So it was just a really great support. And even at the end of the day, it's just like someone to talk to and is on your side, got your back. So that's what I really loved. And then Andrew was a great resource to kind of just check in every week and kind of learn about what you're more of like a personal level of what do you like, what are you trying to kind of go into. And then also just like a kind of check up every week of how are you feeling? I know this program's stressful. What can we do to help you in any way?
Okay, beautiful. Elliot, what were your thoughts on that? And maybe share where you ended up in your role. Right, Johnny, you're working now, if I remember correctly, at Invest Ottawa, right? Ottawa's home for you. Okay, good. And Elliot.
Yeah, so for the Career Center, I liked how each coach kind of had a different specialty. So depending on what your guys' interests are, they have like different types of coaches that can really help you. So I worked with Keith, who is really good in like the technology and kind of like clean tech space, but they also have coaches that can cover like banking if you're interested in that, and others. So that's what I really liked about the Career Center. And then Andrew was great. He was like a kind of a performance coach, if you call him. So he'll kind of make sure you're always trying to strive to your goals and just kind of keeps you motivated throughout the course, which is was a huge help for me. And then in terms of kind of post GDB, I decided to go back to the same company, but in a business management role. So I took a very ambitious job, which basically I'm kind of developing a strategy to grow one leg of the business in a pandemic and in a depression, you can almost call it. So the GDB definitely taught me that I can strive for those challenging jobs.
Okay, final one now. It's really about if you had to give the program advice in a way that helps Jacob and Anastasia understand maybe where some of the weaknesses are in it, that it needs to do better at, or at least things that, you know, might not have delivered on what you'd hoped, what might those be so that they see the challenges sometimes in some of these programs? Either one, you can jump at it because I know it may take a second or two.
I think the biggest thing that pops into my head is it is challenging and it is a time commitment. So you have to be ready to commit yourself to it, wanting to do the program. That being said, all the courses are doable. I was really afraid about all the quantitative courses because I come from a philosophy background. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do MBA level finance class. But then the way it was taught and I dedicated myself to it, I was able to do well in these classes. But yeah, I think you need to make sure you're in a really good schedule, whether it's like you wake up, go for a run in the morning, and then you are taking class, because it can get tiring and you want to make sure that you're not burning out throughout the 4 months.
Beautiful. Yep. Elliot?
I would say the only thing, it was kind of a problem just because of COVID and the pandemic. It was a little hard to meet people beyond your group. So we had like one-on-one chats, which were pretty good, but I found it was a little bit hard just to kind of link up with like the rest of the class. But in your group, you're very close and you're like very tight knit, which was cool.
Really nice.
It kind of added to that. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jonna.
Yeah, I did find it was a little bit difficult to make friends organically, because the way that like I tried to meet people out of my group is I would just set up a Zoom call and just have a quick chat. So it was easy to kind of meet people and make some like friendships, but it was hard to make those deep, meaningful friendships that you would outside of your group. Like my group were really close. Just being in that environment with people. So that was a little bit of a challenge for me.
So you guys, if you have questions, I'll give you a second if you want. If you have ones, that's perfect. I'll tell you a little bit now about what we're thinking about the program for next year as we anticipate COVID potentially still being a factor, is where our head's at now. What we learned from this program this year, and Jonna and Elliot jump in, but we learned that the remote delivery model actually, because of our investment in the studio, has some real value. Whether it's capturing the programs and allowing people to go back and review sessions, to the way in the type of class size we go for between 40 and 60, as Jonna said, like literally when I'm in that classroom, it's no different than being in my classroom physically because I see everybody. And so we see that as an asset that we hadn't anticipated. So the way we're thinking of the program structuring is continuing on many levels with that to give people more flexibility, but also the whole social dynamic and not being able to meet other people organically and easily. What we think we're going to do is we're going to inject residential sessions into it. So the idea is that the program would likely look like this. For the first 2 weeks of May, again, COVID allowing, we would bring everybody to Kingston. We will put you in a hotel for 2 weeks and you will get an immersive experience with the whole group. Be the orientation, it would be the kickoff of the courses. And then some people might choose to stay in Kingston because they want to be a part of that. That's fine. Some people will want to go wherever home is for them and want to run their lives that way. That's fine. But that the way we would run the courses would be delivering through remote means out of our studio. So that could mean a bunch of people maybe in Toronto and they want to go to our Toronto facility to watch, and we can enable that. A bunch might want to stay in Kingston and enable it from there. And so they'd be broadcast from a classroom from our studio. And then we expect there's going to be some people around the world as well, who then we would just enable them similarly through Zoom, so that we would be able to deliver that same academic experience that we've proven works really well and gives enormous flexibility, while also injecting these residential sessions, probably two, one at the beginning, one in the middle, where we get everybody together in a way that allows those bonds to form. And then still wrap around everybody all the same things. So the full-on team model with coaching, the full-on career center model with one-on-one coaching, the high performance coaches, all those pieces staying in play again. And so that's the notion that we're leaning heavily towards. I'm going to just ask you, Jacob and Anastasia, just to give a gut check on what you think of that. But Elliot and Jonna, what do you think of the program if we did that? Would that potentially address some of those shortcomings you mentioned just a few minutes ago? Maybe we'll start with Elliot on this one.
Yeah, I'd say for sure that'd be a great idea, just because it kind of gives you that real life. It's almost like all virtual. It's a little bit tough to kind of gauge people and meet them organically, but I think mixing remote and with the residential would be a great mix.
Yeah, and of course the residential, there'd be no additional cost. We have a model of doing this in our exec MBA programs. And so fundamentally, we would just put you up in hotel partnerships we have in Kingston right on the water. Jonna?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all about having a setting where you can have those organic hangouts and it's not feeling really forced, like, oh, let's become best friends through Zoom right away. So it's, once you can build that, then it's easy to maintain it. Then we can FaceTime and we can do things. But to have that initial experience together, I think would be really helpful.
Got it. Okay. All right. We're getting close to time, but Anastasia, Jacob, anything today that you learned that's not clear that would be useful for us to expand on, or just any general commentary?
I like the idea of having the first couple of weeks there in Kingston. I would even consider staying for the duration of the program there in Kingston, because coming from a science background, not a business background, when it comes to terms where I am struggling, I like being able to work through with peers and figuring it out on my own in that sense. And I like that Jenna said, even though she wasn't from a business background, although it was some work, it was manageable. That gave me some more confidence into this program because it is so condensed.
Good, good. Anastasia, anything in general? No obligation, but anything you noticed?
To speak upon, you guys were talking about your groups. Do you have the same groups throughout the entire program? Yeah, and the way that those, I mean, I don't know if Elliot or John, I could speak upon that, or, but are the groups like equally, each discipline is like kind of, you have a good dynamics of like a science, a bit like, well, I don't know if people in business are actually taking this course, but more so everyone else. But I know that I took a course in my undergrad that had to do with many different disciplines. And like, I found that working with others, because coming from my science background, I did a lot of independent work. So I found that there was a lot of, there's like a disconnect between different disciplines. So I just wanted to know your feedback on working with different disciplines and how, like, from the beginning of that, of working with that group until the end, like what, what you progressed from.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Similar to you, I was in philosophy. So, I mean, different disciplines, obviously, but I did all independent work in my undergrad and was writing essays and then when I was coming to the GDB, I was like, whoa, this program is all team-based. So to answer your question, it is one team throughout the whole program. And the reason for that is we're magically placed in this team. Jim does some science and puts us into a group together, and we're all just have different skills that complement each other. So there'll be two people who are really good at math, and then there'll be like two people who are really good at writing. And it really works well throughout, like when you're doing an assignment. Like when I was doing my first one, I was like, oh, I really see why we're put together. And then kind of the focus throughout the summer is developing that group to becoming what they call a high performing team. So you have a coach with you who you'll have meetings with regularly, and you'll talk about different things, how to improve as a group, feedback for people, etc. And then just kind of growing that team throughout the summer. And then by the end of the summer, you're just, I mean, hopefully the aim is that you're functioning super well, quickly, and you're able to really use each other's assets to excel.
Mhm. Awesome.
Elliot, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say like for me, like I first started out, and then I'm used to working like engineering groups. We're all very similar ideas and focus. And then I was like, whoa, okay, like you get a much more kind of creative ideas blossoming from the diversity. So that was pretty cool. And the difference in strengths is huge. Like I remember when we were writing essays, I'm terrible at essays, references. I don't know how to reference anything. So your team will really help you with what you're bad at. And if you just keep working at it, you'll be fine.
And I'll offer up to Jonna's point about the magic. One of the things we do, and it's a big part of Connor's responsibility, is to make sure that when we form a class, we have that very mix of people from all kinds of different schools, ideally across the country and a little bit around the world. Certainly varied disciplines. And Anastasia, you'll be lucky if you have one person or maybe two who's taken a few business courses just as electives in undergrad. Most folks are in the same boat in terms of each of the courses as a starting point. They're in the same boat. And what we do, though, is once we get the class selected, we spend a full day with myself, a few other people, Connor, and some trained organizational behaviorists. We sit down and we force you to do these behavioral tests ahead of time, which those folks would have done. And then we use that, plus we use the fact that Connor and I get to know the students through the interview process and a bunch of other variables, and we put them together. And it's really fun because we will form a first cut of all the teams, and then the organizational behavior people will pick one person and say, oh, no. That person is this type. They will be a disaster in there. We have to take that person and put them over here. And I'll go something like, oh, come on, we just had it set. And I'm not even kidding you. It's like some kind of drafting type scenario in sports. And we're manipulating who goes where because we know how important it really is. And we don't always get it perfect. And there's always teams that have challenges, but generally it creates a good learning experience. And then what we do, which I don't know if you guys will love, is we like creating difficult circumstances to rattle the group. So maybe Jonna and Elliot, you might comment on what we did when you came back from the midterm break in early July, when we had that session with the people from Reticle. Maybe just tell just a little bit about what that was like. So coming from a week-long break, thinking you're going to slowly jump into school again, and then boom. Jonna, start us off.
Oh, well, that day was unlike any other. We came back from our break. We thought it was going to be a super chill day. We had just a workshop planned. We thought just like watching presentations, but it was nothing like that. It was this full-on workshop with like many different people, and we had a bunch of challenges that we had to kind of overcome. Let me see how I can put it. It was just, there was challenge after other challenge that we had to solve, and they kept throwing more stuff at us. And they gave it, like, for example, we had to read like 200 pages in 10 minutes, and they didn't really tell, like, just figure it out. And then we started doing it all, and they're like, maybe you should divide up all the work between each other. So there were so many things we weren't told. But maybe Elliot can tell it better. I think it was quite the experience. After all said and done, I was like, this was really interesting, and I'm glad I got super challenged. But I thought it was gonna be a chill day, and it wasn't.
Yeah, and I would say I just kind of expected a slow-paced day. I was kind of like still in my sweatpants. I was going to take it easy all day, and then all of a sudden they said, okay, you got to read all that stuff like Jonna was saying. And then it was ex-army, like military people yelling at you throughout the day, and there's hostages here and there, and there's like an explosion over here, and you just have to kind of navigate through. So it was a day of chaos, but it was definitely fun to kind of test the resiliency of the group.
And
Yeah,
the,
it was. Go ahead, Jonna.
I was gonna say, like, the uncertainty of what was gonna come up next. So basically, we're like in a role, and we had to solve all these problems that this business was going through. Like, there were hostages, there was this. We had to do a press conference, and people would just jump into the room, and there was someone from anywhere, like the news channel, like, "Hey, we heard this happen. Do you have a statement ready? Like, what's your statement?" And we're like, "I don't think we're supposed to give it to you, but I don't know." And then we would do it, we'd be like, "That why would you tell this person?" Like, I had to hear through the news, and it was like, oh my goodness. But it was a really interesting and fun experience, and I felt like I bonded a lot with my team, because at the end we're like, wow, that was a lot of stress, but that was definitely entertaining.
And so that's part of what the program is to keep you a little bit on your heels throughout the 4 months, not really knowing what could happen. All right, that was really all we wanted to do for you folks. Just for those folks who've been involved before we kick off the new, I wanted to make sure you heard, okay, what is the real story on this? And I'm sure it's all right for me to say that both Elliot and Jonna, if you had more questions and you wanted to talk to them privately or anyway, that Connor could enable that for you as well. Any final observations, Jacob, Anastasia, anything that's top of mind that you'd like to ask now, or we put
All of my questions have been answered. Thanks.
Perfect. Anastasia?
No, same here. Very
Okay, well, listen, Jonna, Elliot, thanks both of you for giving us your time. Connor, thanks for scheduling to get these folks together. If there's anything we can do on any front, let us know. But again, we're going to start ramping up mid to late October. And so if it's of interest, let us know, and we can move that process forward before we then just kick into our normal recruiting. Sound fair? Okay. Everybody have a wonderful Friday. Hopefully the weekend is relaxing to folks. You're not having to work too hard, Elliot or Jonna or Jacob and Anastasia, because I can tell you with 100% certainty, I won't be doing a damn thing this weekend. So, all right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you later.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.